Our next caller is someone called Matt. Hi, Matt. How can we help you?
Oh, God.
I don't know. How can you guys help me?
There's no helping you.
I
missed you both, but there's been a lot going on. And I had some questions. One of the things that I keep getting asked, and been asked many times, is, why is fundamentalist religion so prevalent in the U.S. compared to the U.K. or whatever? And I was looking at, Governor Abbott has called a special session of the Texas legislature on the 20th, and it's going to be more of this evangelical agenda. Not only are they just outright gerrymandering districts to maintain their power despite the fact that they're a minority, but now they're going after trans athletes, and let's be fair, it's young girl trans athletes that they're going after. And I know that there's difficulties with regard to trans rights and women's rights and rights for people with a womb. But I mean, you guys in the UK, you're not dealing with someone trying to take away a woman's right to choose, et cetera. So what do we need to change about how we're doing it here, or can we do it? What are your guys' thoughts on the differences and how we can best deal with it?
Yeah, it's very difficult seeing the differences in where the sort of culture is going and trying to work out what it is that's, different about it. I mean, something that I often spend time thinking on at the moment is the difference between how the US and the UK deals with trans rights. Like, we're both dealing with the same global anti-trans panic, but we're dealing with it in very different ways. And looking at the differences is very interesting. I know you may have heard the term Turf Island, which is some nickname that the UK has managed to get because we seem to be churning out this sort of certain class of, middle class white person who writes for newspapers who don't like trans people, and we just have all of them here. Like, in America, you have your, your religious evangelical crew, and they seem to be the main source of it. But here we have the Christians, but then we also have, just from across the whole of society, left wing and right wing, and like religious, non-religious people, and they're all kind of formed on the same thing. But then we also don't have this debate about abortion going on in the same way that you do in the US. And it is interesting seeing the difference between the two and trying to work out what the difference is. Because I think one interesting thing to highlight is that abortion hasn't always been like a religious thing. Like, in the USA, it's very much like, this is a religious issue. It's the top religious issue. Like, it's like about abortion, and then it's about gay marriage. But they don't have to be big religious issues. There are lots of other much bigger religious issues that they could be arguing about, but they've decided to like focus the culture war on those things. Mm-hmm. But to fully understand
it's only
why,
been in the past few decades with Jerry Falwell and the moral majority on the right turned it into a religious issue when it wasn't before.
Yeah,
I think that there's an element of control over society when you give women and folks with wombs the ability to call the shots on their own reproductive futures. Then they start calling the shots more in society as well. And so the reason why that is so important is because, as we've seen in this country, women didn't have the right to vote. And then they may have had the right to vote, but they didn't have very many opportunities. And then the war, World War II, World War I happened. Suddenly there were more women in the workplace. Right. And did I say 2 and 1?
Yeah.
I'm traveling backwards in time. So,
okay.
But I do think earlier that you were in Paris instead of paradise.
Did I say Paris? Who said, did I say Paris or paradise?
You said spend an eternity in Paris.
I thought you were just making a joke. Okay. Well, no. I haven't been to Paris yet. No. But I do think that these groups are seeing that male-dominated hegemony slip away over time. And it's not just over a group of people, like when we had like African-American folks who were kept in bondage in this country, and that was a percentage of the population. We're talking about a full 50% of everybody is now falling out of the control of a group of people. That's why you hear these folks saying, "Oh, it's so hard to be a man these days. I'm being oppressed. Help, help! I'm being repressed." Where in fact it's just, "Oh no, now you just can't call the shots." And so I see that as an element of anti-feminine. Yeah. You still can, sure, but I see that as an element of that. What I see the difference is, and I've read a little bit about this, and I don't know what the consensus is on it, but in Europe, you'll have a lot of countries that have national religions, and they tend to be fairly milquetoast, right? Because you have a diverse group of people in that country who are saying, well, this is the official religion, but it's going to have to be pretty loose. It's going to have to give me the freedom to practice how I want to practice. It's going to have to be fairly benign in background. Otherwise, there's going to be some problems, friend. And in this country, we've taken a different tack. And that tack is, you can all believe whatever the heck you want. And so everyone can retreat into their corner. They can populate their own petri dish, and it can be extreme and strange and exclusionary. And the stranger, the more likely that they're going to try to flex their muscles in society, because for them, there isn't a lot of common ground. For them, it's their way or the highway. I mean, this is just an impression that I get. Whereas opposed in Europe, those conversations aren't happening like they are in the United States, from what I understand.
It's interesting. I mean, Europe is obviously extremely diverse, and we've just had Hungary and Poland do horrific attacks on LGBT people and women. So Poland's outlawed abortion. I think Hungary's moving to do that, or has done that, and Hungary's also like totally decimated trans rights, so there are just none. And they aren't even recognized as a group in society anymore. And Poland's got these anti-LGBT zones, and like Poland is a very Catholic country, and a lot of the drive for Hungary is this kind of the same thing. It's their sort of turn back to the patriarchy. And I think it's interesting watching them have similar angles. I think they're all coming in with this kind of, you know, we don't like trans people, we don't like people doing abortions, we don't like, you know, people loving people who they want and stuff. And it's all part of this same thing, I feel. And I think it's a strategy. And I don't know if it's necessarily like a conscious strategy. I think to some degree it is. There are some of these big patriarchal groups like Heritage Foundation and ADF and stuff like that, who do explicitly strategize, and they say, oh, if we want to get rid of LGBT rights, we need to break up LGBT people into separate groups. And, oh, if we want to, you know, stop women from doing this, this, and this, then we need to target abortion and things like that. But equally, I think it's evolved in a way that's a good way of getting these patriarchal ideas back into popularity. So I think, yeah, it is definitely happening in Europe. It's not happening. I mean, it's happening in the UK, but they're all kind of different, you know, different balances as to what people are focusing on. And I do absolutely think that the big push against trans rights in the UK, I mean, it's already led to an increase in like anti-gay hate crimes as well, because of course, whenever there's an increase in transphobia, there's an increase in homophobia, because it's similar attitudes from the same people. But I have no doubt that they're lining up. Sorry, go ahead.
It just makes me wonder, you know, I was listening to what Johnny said. We'd had discussions before about how, you know, in the United States, when we got freedom of religion, that breeds a competitive capitalist market where religions have to compete against each other. But talking with Katy, the fact that you're living on Turf Island, and it doesn't seem that religion is the foundational motivation for the anti-trans actions that are taking place there. Maybe it's the case that religion is being used as an excuse here, and the underlying reason for the bigotry, the generic homophobia, I'm afraid of trans people, religion's being used as a shield for them not having to acknowledge. It reminds me of the people who are like, oh, I didn't say that that atheists are fools. Psalm 14:1 said it, which means God said it. This could be the same thing. It's like, I don't dislike trans people or gay people. God doesn't want them to, that kind of thing. And maybe getting to the heart of where the real bigotry comes from. All of us as atheists, especially doing atheist shows like we do, I think we need to be cognizant of the temptation to blame it all on religion when there's plenty to blame on religion, but maybe religion is being used as a shield conveniently to hide the fact that some people are just awful.
I do agree.
Not to too painfully plug the nonprofits, but I will. The flagship show of the Atheist Experience Network, which is an organization I work with. But we are covering these issues. I think that, and I guess now you're making me think about something, like maybe it's people are using, and I've said this before, because I worked with this really hateful woman who rose in the ranks in this governmental agency. Sorry. No. Well, this is our first time working together. So, but she would use her religion to fuel her hate, to color the flames of her hate and prejudice. But there are plenty of people in the atheist community who use their hate, their these ideas that they hold closer than anything else, and they wrap everything around it. And so what we're doing on the nonprofits is pointing out these inequities that exist in society. And sometimes it's in the case of religion being the fuel, but sometimes it's folks in our own community who are using cherry-picked statistics or cherry-picked facts, don't care about your feelings kind of attitudes. But there's an inherent, there's a nut at the middle of them. There's a stone where their heart should be, that is really the crux of it. And so as we're cracking, and this is where I'm getting. I'm not just rambling. I'm rambling with a purpose. But growth is hard, I think. Our society, the world, has changed over the course of the 6,000 years that the earth has existed. And languages change, societies change, the structures in societies change, and there's always a pushback. There's always a doom and gloom, the sky is falling attitude throughout the entire process. And I wonder if, and I hope that, these attitudes that people are taking toward members of the LGBT community and towards women and reproductive rights and other issues of the day are not a lashing out because they have nothing else to lose. Now that we're in the information age 2.0, and they're losing, they might not be losing political power because of craftiness on the part of the politicians, but they are losing the numbers. And I did read an article, I think it was from The Guardian, where as groups lose political power and control over society, they boil down to the more extreme forms. And I'm wondering if these holdouts on the LGBTQ community are becoming more vociferously toxic, if that's the right use of the word vociferous.
I think that it definitely for LGBT rights, and particularly for trans rights, the fact that trans people for the first time in our society ever have got to the point where they're like normal in some people's minds. That is what is like fueling this trans panic, because there were these people going around thinking, oh, I'm superior to trans people. If they even knew what a trans person was, they just, oh, it's just a joke. It's just a disgusting thing. I'm better than these people. And all of a sudden we're like on the news and presenting Eurovision Song Contest and stuff. And they're like, whoa, the world has changed and I don't like it. And that inspires this kind of reaction. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. I think that's the reason that the trans panic is a pendulum swing moral, what am I trying to say? It's a backlash to trans people winning. We have majority support, and whenever you do polls, most people support trans rights, but that doesn't mean that the government is, and that's because the people in power are, reacting. But just to go back to oh, sorry.
No, sorry.
So just to go back to
please.
Doing it. Sorry, cutting you off. Just go back to what Matt was saying about which is the kind of driving force? Is it like religion pushing it, or is it like religion being used as an excuse? I guess I would say that in the UK, there's definitely an element of religion driving it. I think one of the differences that's worth factoring in when you sort of compare the UK and the US is that here it's rude to talk about your religion. It's like uncouth. It's not really what people do. And I know in America, that isn't an issue. You know, people just talk about their religion in your face all the time. Even very religious people will just not do that here because it's just not the done thing. So instead, they will just come up with a different reason to push their ideas. And often it's not always clear when they're, you know, a religious person pushing their sort of religious ideas. But then you see who they are and who they're connected to, and suddenly it's quite obvious. For example, the court case that we had last year in the UK, which was absolute load of bullshit, and hopefully is going to be repealed soon, which ended up banning healthcare for trans children under 16. The lawyer who did that is this like Christian lawyer who is like anti-abortion and has been doing similar things and has been pushing to try and push back on abortion rights as well. So it is a thing in the UK, but I think it is also to a lesser extent. It's a bit more hidden as well. But when it comes to these beliefs, I think the religious beliefs and these other beliefs can kind of support each other. I don't think it's just like religion can also be a tool. If you want other people to agree with you, then you can say, oh, well, you know, you're a Christian and I'm a Christian, and God says that trans people are disgusting, so we need to deal with them. And that can win some people over. But this person in the first place wouldn't be saying that if they didn't have an irrational prejudice. And it wouldn't sell to people if they didn't have some form of irrational prejudice. It's just that transphobia at the moment is very easy to sell because lots of people just don't know a trans person. But yeah, I mean, yeah. Anyway, sorry, what were you going to add, Johnny?
Well, I was just going to say that we've made this progress in society where LGBTQ people are out there, they're public, they're vocal, they're advocating for themselves with allies at their side, right? And the history of civil rights is that the people taking for themselves what they are entitled to, and others who are like-minded standing at their sides. And there is pushback, and there will always be pushback. And here's the thing. The folks who have now found a voice, I've said this before, the folks who have found a voice, who have found media outlets, who have found that they have political power and economic power and social capital and have value, they're not going to go back into the closet and just go back into a place of shame and the source of the butt end of jokes. They're not going to do that willingly. So these folks who are advocating for all the stuff that we see, these holdouts, someone asked in the chat, who are the holdouts? Trans deniers, folks who want to restrict the rights of the folks in the LGBT community, all these holdouts, ultimately, they're going to have to shove everybody back into silence and obscurity. And I'm sorry, I don't think that's going to happen with anything less than some sort of totalitarian overhaul or overthrow of the institutions that exist.
Has happened before, so it's not impossible.
Sure has.
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think it's the same with the abortion issue. I actually saw an Answers in Genesis episode a while ago when I was doing something with Paula Gia, and they were saying that the acceptance rate for abortion, or people who support abortion in the US, was actually at its highest ever. I don't actually know if that statistic was totally true, but it's very high. You know, it's been historically, it's been much lower. And
but it's not monolithic. It's not unrestricted abortion rights, to be clear. It's not you can have an abortion any old time, but some availability for abortion.
Yeah. And that kind of makes sense with what we were saying about how it's, you know, in reaction to losing ground. Definitely. And I think also, I think it's part of this kind of general global shift right, that, you know, this is part of this. It's tied into that. So,
Matt, this is the longest that you've been on a call-in show where I haven't heard your voice. So we've said a lot, and I know, my friend, that you have things to say about this, and I want to hear them. Please. Don't be shy.
Oh, you couldn't be more wrong. I genuinely wanted to get your thoughts and to listen to you and Katy kind of bounce off these ideas, because, this notion of is the difference because of religion? Is religion being used as a shield, or is it still underlying there? No, I just wanted to hear what you guys thought. I think, first of all, you guys know I love you both, but this is a really good pairing. You guys work well together, and I like the day, night, light, dark aesthetic thing you've got going on there. I could, if Katy just had some horns to put on, I could imagine you guys sitting on each of my shoulders trying to guide me through life.
I can do
do that.
a dryad crown or something.
Oh,
perhaps that's as good as I can do.
That is nice.
Give me like a moon pixie
anyway,
thing.
Great show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for calling. And I think it's an interesting topic. Mm-hmm. But I think we can probably fit in another caller. So, oh no, our caller just dropped. Okay, caller, we still have time for you, so please do call in. Call back. That'd be great, because I think there's time to still fit you in. Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic to discuss about how much does religion influence people's beliefs and how much do people's beliefs influence their religion. I do think there are some examples of beliefs which are obviously just religion. Like if you believe that Jesus was a real person who once walked on water, like that's like pure religious belief. But if you think that, people shouldn't have gay sex or something, there is probably at least someone on earth who has read the Bible on their own, made that interpretation and thought, oh, well, I didn't really have an opinion before, but now I do. But I don't think at all that's the majority. I think that's a vast minority of people who have that history of getting to homophobia.
Paul's call kind of feeds back into this, doesn't it? Where was it an enthusiastic, inspired, mystical person who cooked up that idea, having an experience of the divine, or was it some prevailing notion of, ew, that's not for me, and therefore it shouldn't be for anyone? And then that was codified into a metaphysics of reality, or whatever you want to call it. This is in the Book of Laws now, and it's handed down from God. It just so happens to be exactly what the ruling class wants us to do. It's just coincidental, isn't it? It's amazing that a people's God always seems to agree with the people's ruling class. Not to be Marxist about it or anything like that, but intentionally Marxist. That is. But I do think that because we see human societies generally not following the rules verbatim of their holy books of ancient times anywhere in the world, we do see people behaving differently. There may be examples in various parts of the country where people get their heads chopped off or hands chopped off or other parts of their bodies chopped off because the holy books say so. Yes. But on the whole, largely, there is a softening of these ideas. And I think that they are softened through the organic growth of compassion and interhumanness. I don't know if that's not a good word. Is a better word for it. I don't know what it is. But and that's what's happening. We don't have slaves. We can have them if we take them from the nations around us. But you don't see Jewish folk doing that. Why? Well, because we don't do that anymore. We don't do that. It's not right. I guess they still could technically, according to some folks, but they just don't, because other people are flexing their muscles and saying, "No, go ahead, come and take it." Not going to happen, because the force of authority of the rest of the governments of the world will weigh in, and now suddenly Israel will be smote by the UN if they started taking slaves. I think that.
I don't know. No one's smiting America for having slave labor in prisons, but whatever.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. it's complicated. It's a complex. I know
Spicy.
a bit about it. Yeah, it's spicy indeed.
I think, like, I guess slavery as a popular thing is, it's gone in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But as an actual thing that still happens, it is not gone. And as a view of whether it's good or not, I don't know. I guess comparing it to these other moral issues, and maybe some other, like another moral issue that hasn't come up yet, which is another similar one, is like the death penalty. Some of these issues go away and then they come back.
Sure.
I know that in the UK we got rid of the death penalty, before I was born, maybe in the 70s. It wasn't actually that long ago. And it's not really been a topic, but I have noticed that recently some people have been trying to make it a topic, and I'm concerned about it becoming like a debate again. So it's hard to know. I guess some views, as a trans person, I do worry. It's very easy to say society kind of generally moves forward. Sometimes it has these little backswings, but it generally kind of trickles forwards. But I just know that, for example, just before Nazi Germany was like the most accepting any country was in the world for trans people, and it was where all of the research about trans people was going on. And then they did have this totalitarian, genocidal government, and it wiped them all out, and it, destroyed all the research. And sometimes it does suddenly go back, and it's kind of like this abortion thing in Texas. Like, you've had abortion for a long time now, as like, as a technically a right, though in Texas it's been very difficult or impossible to access it practically anyway, so it's
getting more difficult over time.
Yeah, and now it's got even worse. And like, is this, I mean, obviously there are some people who are like, this is a good thing and hopefully this is a new trend globally, but like, it really better not be, because that'd be horrifying. I just hope this is like one of these things like the North Carolina bathroom bill, where they try it and it gets stamped out and it goes away.
Right.
But
this won't be solved. This abortion dilemma in Texas won't be solved with another law. I don't think. I think that we see in other parts of the world where some deciders, some politicians, some special interest groups try to get something passed that does not fit with the true consensus of society, right? The real work is done building the consensus, making those connections, like Paul was saying, right? So that when you get to a situation like Obergefell versus Hodges, which legalized gay marriage in the US of A, that although there's pushback, I say no one who can actually stop it. Well, let's just say that it was too popular. It was just too popular to stop it. And so perhaps it's a bad idea to rest on our laurels and let that one Supreme Court opinion be the end of it, the end of the discussion. But in order to make a more permanent change in society, we need to have structural changes in our government to codify it so that it becomes difficult to undo it. Because right now we're one Supreme Court opinion away from undoing that ruling. Same thing with Roe versus Roe
v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade. That's one Supreme Court opinion, and yet there was never a follow-up to the Constitution, making sure that that was codified into law. That would require a lot of people to take action. But here's the thing: now that Texas has drawn a line and said, again, come and take it, come see what you're going to do, and Trump and his cronies, his mire lurkers, got power, perhaps as a grasping at straws, perhaps as a last death gasp of a dying ideology, which is, I cross my fingers, to the void, right? Nothing exists. Perhaps that they'll win in the short run, maybe within our lifetime, maybe within a good chunk of our lifetime. But overall, we've seen what happened in Argentina. right? There has been a persistent push to legalize abortion. And it happened. It happened last year where those in power were like, no, we're not going to do it. But the people were like, fuck you, Nabo. We're going to make this fucking thing happen, or we're going to burn your political careers. And they're like, oops, I want to get reelected so I can keep on taking bribes. So I better make this change. Right. And they did. Yeah. And so maybe we need to do that. You're done.
Think
yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping that this attack on women galvanizes people. And, I think people were kind of comfortable about it. It's very easy for sort of liberals to just sit back and be like, oh, it's all fine now. We've got gay marriage. We're fighting off the trans rights stuff. Women can vote. That means I don't need to do anything anymore. I don't need to care about politics. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, no, there's still a huge group of people. I mean, that's obviously a very privileged, dumb position, full stop. But it's, I think lots of people were able to do that. I keep thinking of this tweet I saw just after Biden got voted in, or when he got confirmed, or whatever the process is, and they were doing it as if it's a nature documentary, and it's oh, and here we can see liberals hibernating, and there was these examples, people saying, I can't wait to go back to not caring about politics. It's what, just because Joe Biden, what are you talking about? But hopefully this attack on women and the reproductive freedom, it will make people realize that actually we do need to do something. People have to do something, and it's going to have to involve organizing and learning and helping people, and to fight off this bullshit. And hopefully, like you say, make it more secure than a single opinion from it should be the most basic form of law, that all people have access to bodily autonomy and healthcare, and to be able to marry who they want. So,
and maybe as the religious start decreasing in numbers and influence, if they continue to do so, if the information keeps spreading, if the arguments are had in both polite society and in confrontational call-in shows and other places like that, keep on happening, and as the kids start realizing that this really dense, virulent form of religion just doesn't match their morality, their experiences, their interconnectedness with humans, those laws will die off. Just like we don't have people passing laws on what you can do with your slaves, or things like that. No one wants that anymore. And it was because the hard work of the people who were affected. Somebody in the chat said, why are you obsessed with abortion? I don't know if that was toward those. Abortion? Yeah, no, not you, but us. Because
as a society, the reason that people are obsessed with abortion is because it's women's reproductive freedom is one of the most essential things to them being equal in society. And if you restrict that, then they're second-class citizens, and it's the best way to control them as a group. And as a group, men like to control women, and that's something that's been happening for the entire history of humankind. And so that's why it's one of the things that they target. I mean, just straight up, it's not and this is some moral question or some religious thing. The main driver for this is that people want to control women. And absolutely, it affects, trans men and non-binary people as well. But the intention of this, the main driver, is that people want to control women. And it's the same with why people care so much about what women wear without caring so much about what men wear. It's just because they want to control women. So I think that's an important point to highlight. Before I start ranting about feminism, we have kind of reached the end of the show. Do you have any? It's been a really fun show. It's a shame we dropped the last caller. Hopefully you can call back next week, or the next time that me and Johnny are on a team together, which would be cool. But yeah, do you have any closing thoughts, or?
My closing thought is as follows, Katie, that it can be quite disheartening to see in the world all these setbacks that the nasties out there who are convinced that they're doing God's work and they are doing good. It can feel like you're losing power. and that you're losing control. And indeed you are. But we got into a bad place because a lot of people pushed us here, and we allowed us to be pushed here. So let's just push back. And together, building consensus and finding allies wherever they may be, we can take these, we can push back and get to a spot where not just now I don't have to care about politics anymore, but where we can incorporate that into our daily lives, where political awareness and activity and action is a fundamental aspect of who we are and how we engage in the world. And so history is not over yet. There is still more acts to follow. So let's open that curtain and make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. I like the phrase, history's not over yet. Like, it's not over until you've got a happy ending, because that's when it ends. But